So in 1999, at 23 years old, I decided to leave home. It would be my first real attempt at life away from my mom and away from surroundings that were familiar and comfortable. I was leaving everything behind, all the things that I'd always taken for granted. My house, my bed, my cat, my friends, and conversations with my mom every evening. Plus, I wasn't just leaving my home. I was leaving my country. I had joined the Peace Corps, and I would live the next 2 years as a newcomer in Armenia, a nation halfway around the world, and I did this alone. So back then, before the firewall of airport security, my family joined me at the gate. And to this day, I don't know if I would have made it onto that airplane if my family hadn't been waiting there with me. Because in that moment, with them encouraging me and giving me the support I needed, I didn't realize how afraid I was to leave, afraid of everything that might change while I was gone, and mostly fearful of who might not be there when I returned. It was on the plane that I finally realized my decision. I was leaving everything behind, risking never seeing the people I love the most again. And everything in my whole world was packed into 2 pieces of luggage. I burst into tears, but I didn't get up. I didn't race back out into the terminal. My grandmother's words anchoring me to my seat. I'm so proud of you. So I buckled myself in and prepared for the experience and the journey ahead. Even 20 years ago, I still remember landing in Yerevan and watching out the airplane windows as we coasted into the city. And even from 5,000 feet above ground, I could tell this place was going to be very different from my city back in the States. And it was in those first few days of being a newcomer in this place I did not recognize that I understood that nothing, no amount of preparation or knowledge could prepare me for this experience. I remember the difficulty of learning Armenian with all of its chs and ghs, and trying new foods that didn't agree with my system. And I remember getting my very first haircut and using gestures to communicate what I wanted. But most of all, I remember the patience of the Armenian hairdresser as I made a total fool of myself. I didn't know how to cook there or do laundry by hand. I had to collect water once a week. The toilets were different, very different. And grocery shopping happened in an outdoor market where foods were only available in season. There were so many firsts and so few experiences which matched my expectations. Life in Armenia came with so many new challenges, and I was wholly out of my element. Plus, I was going through the tremendous emotional ups and downs of culture shock as I tried to adjust to my new home. And I know I couldn't have made it through that adjustment or navigated that transition without the grace and the welcome of the Armenian people. It challenged my perceptions of comfort and happiness. And for the first time, I realized that the two are not necessarily connected. And my experience as a newcomer came with valuable lessons about adjusting to new ways of being and doing, and challenged my assumptions about culture and difference. So fast forward to today. I teach brand new immigrants and refugees, newcomers, right here in Spokane at Ferris High School. a public school context that most students take for granted because they are familiar with it, but is new and challenging for my students. So the difference between my students now and my experiences as a newcomer in the Peace Corps is that I chose to go to Armenia. I knew I would only be there for a couple of years, that I would only be the other for a very short time. And I knew that I would eventually get to come home. This is not the case for my students. They didn't choose to come here. They had to. And they likely will never get to go home. So for the past 7 years, I've taught in the Newcomer Center, and I've had the honor of helping these future citizens navigate their transitions to studying and living in the United States of America. Now, as much as those of us who were born here believe that the United States is the land of milk and honey, it is not that for most of us, and especially not for brand new immigrants and refugees. When my students come here with the perception that they are going to have prosperity, their experiences often don't match their expectations, especially because those who have received the milk and honey in the United States have little to no experience with people who have not. So these families flee nations in which they have experienced unspeakable traumas. I've had students who've witnessed the death of their family members, who've experienced violence themselves, who've had to fight for food and water, who fled their homelands because of the threat of violence and persecution. So coming to the United States represents hope for them, and the belief that they can achieve the American dream. Yet, when they arrive, that dream is a lot more difficult to achieve than they have been led to believe. One of the pleasures of teaching brand new immigrants and refugees is that I get to visit their homes. I get to meet their families and see where they live and how they live. Now, sometimes this can be heartbreaking when I see a family of 10 split between 2 apartments in an awful apartment complex. Or I go to a 1-bedroom apartment that has almost no furniture and a mattress on the floor. This can be very difficult to witness, especially when I know we can do better by our brand new community members. Always, though, every visit, I witness love. The unconditional love every parent feels for their children. The common thread between our worlds. My students' parents are committed to their children, committed to ensuring they have everything, every opportunity offered them in their new home. They are driven to make something of their lives. These lives that they've fought so hard to protect. It's truly inspiring. Now, on the first day of school, that's when I truly get a glimpse of what it means for my students to be newcomers. They come into my classroom, unsure of the expectations and wondering how similar this school will be from their experiences before. I remember one student in particular, Saida, a young woman from a refugee camp in Kenya. Her journey to the United States was a difficult one, and it put her behind her peers in her level of education. So as a freshman, she was only at an elementary level. And on that first day, Saida was very quiet. Her senses seemingly overwhelmed by the crowded hallways and the bells that mark the start of the school day and the announcements over the loudspeaker intended to welcome her and her classmates. And I watched her face as she tried to make sense of everything she was hearing and seeing with the little English that she understood. I was so anxious for her. As I watched her eyes dart from classmate to classmate, fighting back tears, searching for a connection with another student seeking the same thing, to feel comfortable in a very uncomfortable situation. I only wanted to make her feel better, welcome, confident, that she belonged. So to that end, every year, we start by getting to know our school. We tour the hallways, locate the bathrooms, figure out the bell schedules. And that year, Saida taught us a very important lesson about the cafeteria when she was reduced to tears because she'd accidentally eaten pork, a hidden slice of pepperoni beneath the cheese in her pizza. It took the entire rest of the day to console her. And after that, she kept getting in trouble for taking too many of the allowed pieces of fruit, for trying to make a salad out of the sandwich garnishes simply because she was so hungry and she didn't know which foods contained pork. She didn't understand the cafeteria workers or how things operated in the lunch line. This was a very valuable lesson. Not what Saida had to learn, but what she had to teach us. We have to help our newcomers navigate everyday systems, like the cafeteria, systems that we take for granted because we're used to them. Seemingly simple things can be overwhelming obstacles for our newest community members. Friday of the first week of school is always telling. Students are totally exhausted from hearing and trying to speak English all week long, and by the end of the day, I almost can't get them to keep their heads up or their eyes open. And Saida's no different. She was slender already, but by the end of that first week, it looked like she'd lost 10 pounds. And sixth period, I often caught her napping. But she'd made friends. She'd learned how to navigate the cafeteria. And she knew how to ride the city bus, not just to school, but all over town. And when she left that Friday, she couldn't wait to come back the following Monday. You see, in the refugee camp, where Saida spent nearly 6 years of her life, returning to school day to day or even week to week was not a guarantee. But here in the United States, it is. And Saida was so excited and thankful for that opportunity. My students, they come to school every day, these newcomers, eager to learn and so thankful for every moment and every opportunity afforded them in their new home. And from my experiences, when brand new immigrant and refugee families come into our nation, the biggest factor in ensuring that they have an easy transition and are set on a path to becoming productive members of our communities is the welcome they receive when they first arrive. I still remember my host family that I lived with when I first went to Armenia, and the welcome that they gave me. They took my hand and they guided me in learning to live in my new home. I want you to think about a time when you were a newcomer, even for a moment. How did you feel? What did you need? Now, visualize the people or person who helped you in that moment. What did they do? How did they ease your fear? We must welcome the newcomer with patience, compassion, and support. And we can do this by intentionally seeking experiences that challenge our perceptions, broaden our perspectives, and give us just a hint of what it means to be a newcomer, a stranger, the other, and have to adjust to a new situation. This can be as simple as visiting the neighborhood across town, or as huge as joining the Peace Corps. But what it comes down to is this: we must welcome the stranger, for we are all strangers at times. We must welcome the stranger, for we are all strangers at times. So when you look on the newcomer, remember, they are overwhelmed with new experiences. They are seeking to navigate their new home, to adapt to it, and to maintain a piece of who they were before they come. They have overcome tremendous obstacles to come to our nation. And every day here brings new challenges for them. We must rise above fear. Fear of the new and fear of what we don't understand because we don't have experience with it. Just like the newcomer does every day. More than that, we must transcend fear of the newcomer in order to create stronger, safer, and more connected communities. So go out today, seek an experience you have never had before. Get out of your comfort zone, go and meet your neighbors. This is the work the newcomer does every day because they have to. But it is our work too. Be empathetic, be compassionate, be courageous and fearless. And above all, be welcoming, because it is the right thing to do. Thank you.